When people look at my life from the outside, they usually see the freedom. They see the travel, the movement, the fact that I built a life that isn't tied to one place or one zip code. And yes, that part is real, but it's not the whole picture because there's another side to a life like this. And it's a quieter side, a more personal side. And lately, I've been thinking about that a lot because freedom can look beautiful from the outside, but what it asks of you and what it stirs up in you is something else. And I think that part matters too. If you're new here, I'm Rhonda Taylor. At 52, I sold everything I owned and began building a life of solo travel and full-time location independent living. Now, after an unexpected rebuilding season, I'm documenting what midlife reinvention really looks like in real time. If you're figuring out what comes next in this stage of life, you're in the right place. When people hear about my life, they usually focus on the freedom. And I get that because there is something powerful about knowing you can get on a plane, go somewhere new, and build a life that doesn't depend on staying in one place. There's possibility in that and energy in that. And there's a kind of expansion in that. And I lived that life for 9 years. So I'm not dismissing that part at all. It is real. I know what it feels like to step outside the usual path and realize your life can look very different from what you were taught to expect. That has been one of the biggest gifts of this life. But that's usually where people stop. And there's so much more to it than that. What people don't always see is what a life like this asks of you. Because when you choose freedom, you do not stop being a mother. You do not stop being a grandmother. You don't stop loving your people. You don't stop wanting connection. And that's where this gets more complicated because my heart has ached too, especially when it comes to my grandchildren. Connection with my grandchildren really matters to me. And that is not some small side note in my life. They matter. There have been real moments of heartache for me, real moments where I've felt what it means to love them so much and still not be there for every ordinary part of their lives. And I don't want to gloss over that because it's true. That is part of this life too. When I started this journey, I had 4 grandchildren. Now I have 6. And all of that happened while I was living this life. And yes, there have been moments when that really hit me, not in some big, obvious way, more in the quiet moments, the kind where you realize time is moving, the kids are growing, life is unfolding, and you're living in a way that does not place you in the center of every ordinary day. That is real. But this is also where I think people can misunderstand a life like mine. Because just because I chose freedom does not mean I chose disconnection. If anything, it made me more aware of how much connection matters. And because of that, I had to get more intentional. I had to get more creative. I had to find ways to keep the communication lines open with my family and my friends. I had to make sure closeness did not just get left to chance. Because when your life looks different, connection has to become more deliberate. You have to reach out. You have to stay engaged. You have to care on purpose. And that became part of this life too. Not just the movement, not just the freedom, but intention, real intention. And here's the other side of it, because this part matters just as much. This same lifestyle also gave me the flexibility to be there when it really mattered. When my oldest daughter went through a tragic life change, it affected not just her, but my two grandchildren too. And I was able to stop everything and go be with them. Not for a few days, for months. I lived with them. I helped them. I was there in the middle of a season that unfortunately changed all of their lives. And I don't say that lightly, because that is one of the parts of this lifestyle people don't always understand. It's not just about where you can go. It's about the fact that you can go. And when my younger daughter had her babies 2 different times, I was able to do that too. I was able to go stay with her, to help and support her, to be there while she stepped into a completely new chapter of her life. So, no, this life has not made me less connected, but it has made me more intentional about connection. And it has also made it possible for me to show up in some of the moments that really mattered most. That means something to me, a lot. And underneath all of this, there's another layer too. This journey has never only been about travel for me. And it has never only been about freedom for freedom's sake. Part of it has been about legacy and what I'm showing my children and grandchildren by the way I live. I want them to know that they can follow their heart. I want them to know that chasing their dreams matters. And I'll say this too, not everybody has understood my choices over the years. That's been part of this journey too. But one of the things that does mean a lot to me is that my son has always been really proud of me, proud of what I've built, proud that I honored myself, proud that I followed my own path. And that means more to me than I can fully put into words. I want them to know that you do not age out of becoming more of who you really are, not in midlife, not later, at any age. That matters to me because I do not want my life to send the message that you reach a certain age and stop listening to yourself, or stop growing, or stop choosing what feels true. I want the people I love to see with their own eyes that following your heart is still possible, that building a life that fits you is still possible, that becoming more fully yourself is still possible at any age. That is part of the legacy too. Now, does that mean this life is easy? Of course not, not even a little bit. There are parts of it that have been really hard. There are moments when I have felt very connected, and there are moments when I have felt the distance. There have been times when I knew I was exactly where I needed to be. And there have been times when I felt what I was missing. That is just true. That is not a perfect life, but it is a life I chose. And choosing it has meant learning how to hold more than one truth at the same time. Freedom and love, flexibility and responsibility, distance and connection, joy and ache. That is the real shape of it. And I think a lot of women understand that more than they may say out loud. Because so many of us, we're not trying to choose between freedom and the people we love. We're trying to figure out how to hold both. And I believe you can. It just may not look the way other people think it should. And maybe for you, this has nothing to do with travel. Maybe your version of this life looks completely different. Maybe it looks like wanting more room to breathe, more flexibility, more honesty, more of your own life back, while still loving your people deeply, while still wanting closeness, responsibility, belonging, connection. I think that is where a lot of women live, not trying to choose between love and freedom, trying to figure out whether they are allowed to want both. And I believe they are. I really do. But the version of both may not look traditional. It may not make sense to everyone else. It may not match what people expected from you. But that does not automatically make it wrong. At some point, I think every woman has to ask herself a real question. Not what looks right from the outside, not what will make the most people comfortable, but what actually fits. What kind of life lets her be honest? What kind of life lets her stay connected? What kind of life lets her love her people well without abandoning herself in the process? That is a real question. And I think more women should let themselves ask it. So, yes, this life has given me freedom, but it has also asked me to get very honest about what that freedom means, what it gives, what it asks, what it makes possible. And for me, that has included ache. It has included intention. It has included creativity. And it has included a much deeper understanding of what connection really means. So, no, I do not think freedom and connection are opposites. I think they can absolutely live in the same life. It just may not look the way some people think it should. If this resonates with you, I'd really love to hear how you think about freedom and connection in your own life. And if you're in a season where you're trying to figure out what your next chapter could look like, I created something that might help. I'll leave the link to the Midlife Clarity Finder below. And if you want to follow along as I keep building this next version of my life in real time, please subscribe, like, follow, and share. Until next time, rebuild boldly and live fully.